Hello there and welcome to the video. So recently I've kind of been in the search for something different for my photography. In last video I tried a pinhole camera, and today I thought we would try some paper film, NoColorStudio nbr 12 to be precise. I am going to share some thoughts about the results in the film itself, but first we need to go out and photograph something. Simple, obvious, but a classic. A lone tree against a plain background. And then we have this the hillside, like a leading lines towards the tree. I think it will work quite nice. The only problem is the wind. It is a slight wind today, mostly a breeze, but I am out shooting NoColorStudio nbr 12, and that's ISO 6. So we'll have quite a long shutter speed today. So that will be a challenge on this subject, because the leaves are shaking a bit constantly. I have packed Retropan 320 as well, so we'll probably do 2 exposures at this scene. So one photographer I admire is Thomas Strutt, a German photographer, awesome photographer, a bit different. And well, he took a couple of images, a series of images of like messy trees, perhaps even ugly trees. And this kind of reminded me of that. We have this quite messy tree here, perhaps even ugly, but I found it interesting, strangely enough, and made an exposure of that, or 2 exposures. And once again, it's NoColorStudio nbr 12, and that was 8 seconds at f16, and then I did Retropan 320 as ISO 200, and that was f16 and 1/5 of a second. And notice that it is a very flat scene. When I measured it with my spot meter, I got pretty much the same EV value throughout the scene, but there is some color difference there, so it might still work out. very postcardy photograph. Nothing wrong with that. Very obvious and very touristy. There's even an information plaque down to the left, which is kind of an eyesore from a photography standpoint, but still quite a nice image. Shot with the wide-angle lens, and that presented a small little problem for me. You see, I have a small little cable release there, but it sometimes gets stuck when you're doing longer exposure above 1 second. So I did 4 seconds here at f16 on NoColorStudio nbr, and it kind of got stuck, so I kind of put my hand in front of the lens. Hopefully that ended the exposure. We'll see if that worked out. But I did one on the Retropan as well, and that was 1/4 second at f16. Oh, sorry, f22, both of them. And it's time to start looping back and head back to the car. We'll see if we find some final scene of this day. Final image of this day, just to kind of finish off the film I brought with me on this little outing. And I was thinking of going like super minimalistic, just photographing the horizon with the sky and the ocean. But I ended up like including the hills and a nice little S-curve in the sand, just to kind of complete the image. And this is taken with my telephoto lens. It is actually my normal lens. But you see, I can unscrew the front cap of that lens, and that will turn it into a 275mm lens. Nice little feature. It won't be as sharp, but it will have to do until I get myself a proper telephoto lens. That will complete this little day, or this little outing. Time to get home and develop some film. That was a surprisingly nice little outing, with a couple of nice images as well. I do want to compare the results from NoColorStudio nbr and Retropan on paper made out in my darkroom, as that is kind of the end product, at least for me when it comes to analog photography. However, there was only one image suitable for that comparison. The first image is my favorite of the day, however with bad negatives. You see, I broke the golden rule. I didn't expose for the shadow. So on the negative for Retropan 320, the tree trunk is almost transparent. With the help of some computer magic, I was able to salvage some details there, but I suspect this will be quite hard to print out in the darkroom. The NoColorStudio nbr negative, better, as I was able to monitor the developing of that, as I did that under the red light in trace. But there are a couple of really bad scratches on that negative. But it shows potential. I really like how the sky and the horizon kind of just blends together. It is really high contrast, the negative itself. So I think there is potential to this, and it kind of feels different than normal film. The second image is a surprisingly interesting image to me. I really like it, it's something different. I like that little highlight at the top of the middle of the image. But as a comparison piece, perhaps not fair. But definitely an image I will return to in the future and try and print and see if I can make something out of it. And this might be a subject matter I'll return to in the future and explore more, because I feel there's a lot of potential of doing something slightly different with that. The fourth image, well, it's not sharp, it's really soft. I think this is partly down to the lens not being sharp at 275mm, which is kind of a trademark of these convertible lenses. But I also think I slightly misfocused. And I was also screaming at the screen when editing this. It's not a telephoto lens, it's a long lens. That leaves the third image of the day, that one of the hut. A bit obvious, a bit postcardy, but still quite a nice image nevertheless. And two good negatives. So I went ahead and printed that out in my darkroom. For my paper I used Fomabrom variant 111, which is a fibre-based paper with a glossy finish. And for my chemicals I used a kit from Bellini. The first print was of Retropan 320, and no big surprises. I did play around a bit with the contrast and settled in on the empty filter from Foma, which equals on hard paper. That gave me a well-tamed, surprisingly nice print. And I must say, the more I use Retropan, the less surprised I am by it. So, quite normal film, to be honest. It is a bit softer than, for instance, Fomapan 200, but I quite like it, especially if you like these grand landscapes. So a film I really like, but perhaps not what I was searching for on this day. That leads us to NoColorStudio number 12. And this was hard to print, because that paper base is quite thick. So when I put the negative in my enlarger, I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't even focus the enlarger. So to be able to do so, I just put back the Retropan image and focused the enlarger and switched back. That seemed to work okay, but it also meant I got a really long exposure. 4 minutes at f8, which is an eternity out in the darkroom. And of course I didn't use any filters because I would have needed an even longer exposure time. And I wasn't going to do that. So this is special normal paper according to Foma. When comparing the two prints, the first thing you notice is the contrast. The paper film a lot contrastier than the normal film, even though that was printed on a harder paper. And this is to be expected. This is kind of one of the traits of paper film. It's contrastier and lower dynamic range. Another thing when I looked a bit closer on the two prints is that the NoColorStudio number 12 lacks a bit of details compared to the Foma one, which was kind of to be expected considering it is a paper base, and I do suspect that doesn't have the same resolution power as your normal film base. But on the flip side, I do like this when it comes to the autofocus area, the foreground and the background compared to the Foma one. It's just that bit softer, that bit more dreamlike, which I think looks really nice. For this image I do prefer the Retropan one, but for a different scene, I think there's something to this, paper film. Another quick note about NoColorStudio number 12 and most paper films is that it is orthochromatic instead of panchromatic. This means it sees a bit less of the light spectrum. So for instance, reds are a bit darker than on your panchromatic, your normal film. I find this quite a nice look and I like it for landscape work, but that is a taste preference. To round off the video, I do have a couple of advice from my future self. Next time you are shooting paper film, dilute the developer a bit more to give you a bit more control of the developing process. And before loading the film, before heading out, try and pre-flash the film just to tame the contrast slightly. Besides that, it is a nice, soft, dreamlike look, well worth exploring. With that said, thank you so much for watching. See you next time, take care and bye!